definition of truth is that it is narrow rather than expansive. And we believe that truth is piercing. So there are properly basic truths, for instance, that I think as human beings, if we were to talk about what truth is all about, like propositional claims, right? We make propositional claims all the time. Truth claims, which are carriers of truth values, they either are true or false. Now, the only way we can make sense of something being true is if there are certain properly basic principles that we have to adhere to and accept in order to determine whether something is true or false. So for instance, I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but so for instance, you guys heard of the law of non-contradiction?
No.
The idea that something and its opposite can't be true at the same time and in the same respect. Like for instance, a squared circle. Can a square, by definition, ever be a circle? No. If I said to you, a married bachelor, you'd say, what? You know what I mean? If I said that God is temporarily eternal, it doesn't make sense. So not only should words make sense, but the truth itself, any truth claim has to take into consideration this law of non-contradiction. Because if you reject the law of non-contradiction, the idea that one thing and its opposite are true at the same time, then no matter what you say, it's possible it could also be false. But I'm a human being. Well, if you claim to reject the law of non-contradiction, it could be that you're not a human being at the same time. These are properly basic truths that are what are known as intuitive in nature. You don't need to think about them. You don't need to argue about them. They are just there to make sense of any truth claim you make about the world. Does that make sense? So, so the claim of truth from Islam regarding the belief in God, we believe is properly basic. And so if we're calling people to Islam, let the truth speak for itself. There's no reason to force anyone into Islam. Once that individual does the research, once that person does the research, he or she can determine through their own volition, through their own free will, whether they wish to accept the truth or not. So, what is the message of Islam? We believe that it is a collective purpose of all human beings. And I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear that the foundational call of Islam is that properly basic understanding that there has to be a creator, firstly and foremost. Now, one of the ways when we encounter an atheist, and just to give you a quick understanding and appreciation, the Quran, which was revealed 1400 years ago to a man named Muhammad, who was an illiterate himself, the Quran didn't really bother with the concept of atheism, because it took as almost a vast majority given that human beings are born with this instinctual nature in the transcendent. This just belief that there is something beyond ourselves, something objective outside of ourselves, that's implanted within each and every one of us, the idea of what this properly basic truth is. So one of the ways the Quran, and there are a few verses, but one of the ways the Quran convinces the person who may have doubts regarding the concept of a creator is just to simply ask the rhetorical question, Afillahi shak? Is there any doubt in the creator, the originator of all that exists? And the way God does this in another verse, he says, it's a threefold question, and I like to give this to the atheist, and it's a good way of actually getting into the discussion, the deep discussion about, well, was the universe always here? Or did it have a beginning? And if it had a beginning, where did it come from?
It's a big conversation a lot of people have.
I know.
I think it's so big.
And it's a conversation that extends back into the past, you know.
Yeah, what's hard for me is although some of my relatives are religious and they go to church and stuff like that, but I've never personally had an experience to sort of say that there's a higher power, there's a higher purpose.
Well, the experience that we are calling to is undergirded. It has a foundation. We're not just simply calling people to believe for the sake of believing. We believe that belief should be founded upon certain obvious truths. Now, if a person truly believes that, well, I don't believe in a creator, I don't believe in a source that brought the universe into existence, we're not going to tell you, well, just listen, just trust me, become a Muslim, and you might find the truth. No, we're not going to do that. We want you guys to be convinced before you come into Islam. So if, for instance, a person believes that God doesn't exist, let's have that conversation.
Yeah.
Is it a simple conversation, or have people complicated it to the point where they perhaps have convinced themselves, we won't be able to reach the truth?
Because obviously, again, going back to the atheism and that,
Yeah.
a lot of people go, well, they ask me a string of questions, why don't you believe in this, why don't you believe in that, but why do you believe in it?
Do you find that convincing, the arguments, or, well, I guess not, right? That's why you're still an atheist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let me give you this verse, the verse from the Quran. It says,
A lot of people that come to me, they've contradicted everything that's said in their Bibles or like,
Right.
stuff like that, so
yeah, that's a moral claim, i.e., are people really living up to the truth that they claim to?
no, which then makes the people who do follow the religion look bad.
Look bad, yeah.
They're claiming to follow it, yeah.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
And we would say let the truth stand for itself. There are people who will follow the truth,
Yeah.
And we would judge people based upon their actions rather than their words, right? As any human being would. I think that's a reasonable way of approaching life.
Yeah.
So just go back to that verse that I spoke about. It's a threefold question. It says, or were they created by nothing? Or did they create themselves? Or were they the creators of all that exists, the heavens and the earth? Nay, they have no certainty. So let's start with the first one. Or were they created by nothing? Do you think that the universe is eternal? Or do you think it has a beginning?
No, I think it has a beginning.
How about yourself?
I'm no scientist. I can't give you the scientific explanation about how the Big Bang happened or how that was formed. But I can't answer that.
No. But even the scientists say there was a Big Bang, there was a singularity. What came before the singularity, they won't know because that's part of the non-physical realm.
Yeah.
Science is all to do with the physical realm, right?
Yeah, it's facts.
Facts, how we perceive things, sight, smell, and so on and so forth, inferences to the best explanation, right? Science is undergirded by the law of causality, the idea that causes and effects brought us to this point, right? If it wasn't for those lifelong experiences of causes, you could say that, well, things could just pop into existence out of nothing. But that doesn't happen in life. You don't walk down and suddenly a chair appears in front of you and you go tripping over the chair. You know that because your life experiences have told you that the causes that determine our existence, they don't allow for things to just pop into existence from nothing. Things are preceded by other things. We were brought into existence through our mother and father coming together and copulating.
Yeah.
You understand? These causes and effects, photosynthesis doesn't happen except until the light from the sun comes and lands on the leaves. So these are all causes that bring about the world. And through these causes, if we have enough knowledge about the world, we can make these beautiful inferences. And that's science. You have a look at things and you can determine and predict how things are going to turn out. So look at the way the world is. The world is so mathematically, if you will, symbolically written down that scientists can actually look at the world, transform their ideas into mathematics, and then start doing maths as a basis for determining the future. So, for instance, you might remember this from your days in school. Einstein said that there's gravity.
Yeah.
Gravity will bend the light going around the sun to allow you to see the things that are behind the sun that you may not be able to see directly.
Yeah.
Now, he had no way of knowing whether that's true. He did it purely through mathematics. And what happened? Decades later, they found that was true. So maths is a powerful tool, but it also points to how precise the world is. That God allowed human beings who can think at the abstract level to look at the world, to create language, to create mathematics, and then start making predictions about how precisely fine-tuned the world is. How it doesn't just suddenly just break down.
I mean, humans have evolved a lot.
I think that's another one for me that I used to
They're
always...
too smart for their time.
Yeah.
I feel like, because my family are Christian, they always talk about Adam and Eve being made in God's image, but like, there's clear scientific evidence of humans evolving through time, so they can't have been made like we are now.
Okay, so going back to the beginning of the universe is the real crux, because the verse says, were they created by nothing? Nothingness is the absence of all things. Nothingness doesn't have the potential to bring anything about. Does that make sense? Is that reasonable? Because I would find that as
it's hard because we don't know why.
Where did God come from then?
Yeah.
He come from nothing.
Very good question. Now the question then, there's an assumption there that God has a beginning. Because you said, well, if God brought the universe into existence, then what brought God into existence?
Yeah.
The assumption there is,
Can't make nothing out of nothing.
exactly, so the assumption there is that God had a beginning for us to ask the question, well, where did he come from then? Now, if that's true, then something brought God into existence to bring the universe into existence. If that something itself has a beginning, then we have to ask, well, what is it that brought that thing into existence, which brought this God into existence, which brought the world into existence?
Yeah, it's just a whole trail.
And you have a trail that goes back into infinity. So it's an absurd idea that you have this infinite number of causes, just like the causes that brought us to this point in the present. We have these infinite number of causes that have a beginning. Now, one thought experiment I like to give people to get them to understand that this idea that you have an infinite number of causes going back into the eternal past is absurd. Is like, what's your name, by the way?
Holly.
Holly, what's your name?
Ewan.
Ewan, my name is Hamza, nice to meet you. Holly, imagine you asked Ewan, give me £1. And Ewan gives it, well, I'm not going to give you £1 until Hamza gives you £1. And I say, well, I'm not going to give you £1 until he gives me £1. And he says, well, I'm not going to give you £1. Now, this is a representation of the causes going back into the past. You know, that thing, bringing that thing about, bringing God about, this God, bringing the universe about. Now, if we had an infinite number of those causes, people asking as a condition, someone has to give me £1 before I give you £1,
Yeah.
going all the way back into the past, no beginning, could those causes, could that pound, I should say, could that pound ever have reached you or me to give to you and for you to give to her? It would just go on forever. So there's, no matter how far back you go, there will always be an infinite number of these people having this condition, I'm not going to give you £1, mate, until that person behind me gives me £1. So this is a proof that, therefore, that an actual infinite can't exist in the real world. It may exist in are you lost? Okay, so look, it's really simple. It's the idea that if the source that brought everything into existence isn't eternal, then you have to face the question, well, what brought that thing into existence?
Yeah.
So the only way out of this conundrum is to say that God has to be eternal. If God has a beginning, then we have to ask the question, well, what caused God? And if that thing that caused God has a beginning, then what caused that? So not only is the concept of nothingness bringing something into existence nonsensical, but the idea that there are an infinite number of causes, that's nonsensical as well. Which brings us to the only one inescapable conclusion, that there has to be a self-sufficient, eternal source or cause. If this cause is there that brought the universe into existence and it is eternal, no beginning, it is self-sufficient. It doesn't require anything outside of itself because there is nothing outside of itself. There was a point where the universe wasn't there and this source brought the universe into existence. This thing cannot be mechanical. It has to be something that has a volition. You know what volition is? A will. Right? We all have wills, right? We all decide every day what to do. From one point to another, from one moment in time to another moment. This thing has to be powerful. Why? Because something which doesn't have power can't do anything. It's as good as nothingness. This thing has to be so powerful that the scientist is telling us that in the beginning of the universe, there were 4 fundamental constants: gravity, electromagnetism, and the 2 nuclear forces, the weak and the strong. And they say that they had to be fine-tuned in order for the universe to begin. And look at the way the universe began. It began from a point of chaos, explosion, hydrogen, helium, atoms, becoming more and more sophisticated until we reach this point where we have near enough harmony. The world is now old enough for the earth to have been created, upon which human beings came about who were able to now think at the abstract level to ask these questions. So what this points to is that this being isn't just powerful, it has to be knowledgeable. Because it implanted within the world, the scientists tell us, these fundamental constants, which had they been just slightly out of tune, like the scientist Paul Davies, he says, had they been slightly out of tune, then either the world wouldn't have begun, or if it did, it would remain inert. No life-giving properties, no way of sophistication, harmony coming about. So what it points to is that this source has to be alive, because it is only a thing that is alive that has a will, that has power, that has knowledge, and has wisdom. Now, you and I, we exhibit these properties. We live because we are powerful, because we have a will, because we have knowledge, because we think, because we are merciful, because we are loving towards each other, because we have justice. All of these attributes, they determine our existence. There's nothing in existence, nothing that exists except that it has attributes. That bin down there has attributes. It exists in time. It's got the property of being black. It has the property of being hard. It's about squarish shape. We're more sophisticated than bin, so we have more properties to exhibit that, right? Now, if that's true for the bin, if that's true for us, if that's true for the whole, the universe, because the verse says, were they created by nothing, or did they create themselves? We didn't create ourselves. We came from our mother and father, who came from their mother and father. Or were they the creators of the universe? Well, we're part of the whole, and the whole came before us. So therefore, the whole didn't bring itself about. And then it says they have no certainty, meaning those people who deny this creator, who's alive, they don't have certainty of knowledge, because then they have to ask these impossible questions. Well, if there's no creator, either the universe is eternal, which takes us back to that analogy of there being an infinite number of pounds, or it came about from nothingness. And nothingness doesn't have the potential to do anything, because it's the absence of all things. Or there's a third option, which most people don't like. Turn off your brain, don't think about it, and just carry on going through life as though there is no purpose.
I said there's definitely a purpose, just everyone has a different one. So some people, that would be their religion, for other people it would be something else.
What would be your purpose as an atheist if you don't believe that there's any life hereafter?
Once I'm dead, I'm dead. That's it.
Yeah, I know, exactly. So what would be your purpose? Before you die, what would be your driving factor? Help the animals? That brings you happiness? Yeah. So think about it like this. Your happiness is recursive. You derive this happiness by being good towards other people and other animals.
Yeah.
But who implanted that goodness in you? If there is a creator, then the entire question of what is good and what is evil is turned on its head. Because suddenly, what are we doing? We're recognizing that there is a source of all things that brought us into existence. And so therefore, if it's good enough for us to bring animals into our life, for instance, when you two came together, again, this is going back to that instinct that God has implanted within all human beings, that properly basic instinct. When you guys came together, you knew instinctually that I have to be good to her and she has to be good to me, otherwise it's not going to be a very conducive relationship.
Yeah.
Right?
But you're conditioned to learn that from your parents and stuff. Like you're shown it, you copy what you're shown.
Exactly. But I'm talking about it being properly basic, because the exception to the rule is to be evil towards each other. If you become evil towards each other, you know it's going to be detrimental to your relationship, and that relationship is not going to work. So the rule here is that human beings, whether they exist in the middle of the jungle, or whether they exist in an advanced society, we all know that when we come together as a couple, when we become a father or a mother, when we bring a pet into our life, we have certain rights that are reciprocal. We bring a pet into our life, we know we have to be good to it. Because if we don't, instinctually we feel bad. Because
then there's free will, people hurt animals.
They do. But that's the exception to the rule. Look, have a look at the vast majority of mankind. The vast majority of mankind, despite us recognizing evil, we come together and we put into place laws, because we know it's not in our best interest if we cheat, lie, steal, deceive, etc. So the rule here is, no matter how primitive you are, or no matter how educated you are, A society, a people, a community, a couple cannot exist. They can't flourish without there being some type of mutual compatibility upon goodness, right? Yeah. Now, if that's true for things that we obviously recognize, going back right into the past when we were in the caves until now, if we recognize those rights amongst ourselves as beings that exist, that exhibit attributes, how about the one that exhibits the attributes that are far more perfect than ours, far more greater in level, that had the incredible power to bring the universe into existence, sustain it, and implant within the universe, including ourselves, all the necessary natural laws to allow us to recognize how we're supposed to live life, how we're supposed to recognize these obvious truths. So the creator isn't aloof. It can't be aloof. It can't just create the universe and say, well,
there's many good things, but there's also a lot of really crappy things as well that have been put into it.
well, have a look. I won't speak for the other religions. I'll speak to you about Islam.
Yeah.
Have a look at the rights that Islam implements. If a person was to ask me, what is Islam in a nutshell, I would say it's the establishment of rights. Those rights that we spoke about upon goodness. So for instance, Islam talks about not to be cruel to animals. Islam talks about not to be cruel to your mother and father. Islam talks about not to be cruel to your neighbors. Even the roadway has rights taught to us by our God in the Quran and by our the Prophet Muhammad, who's a last and final messenger from a line of very many prophets and messengers, some of whom we know, some of whom we don't know, who haven't been mentioned. But we don't believe that this creator brought us into existence and didn't communicate to us a purpose. Because everything in life, what we create and what we come across, we're all interrelated. There's always a purpose, a talos. You guys have a phone. That phone came with an instruction manual because it came with a purpose. We come together, we know instinctually we came together for a purpose. You guys, if you have children in the future, you guys will know. You have a purpose, you have a responsibility. You brought this child into this world and you got to do what you got to do, right? Exactly. And you got to do what you got to do upon goodness and righteousness. And human beings in general have been created upon this natural goodness. It's known in Arabic as a fitrah. And the Prophet said, don't change, the Quran says, God says in the Quran, don't change this fitrah. So the purpose in life is a collective purpose, and that is to worship God alone, meaning that to recognize the most important right and then allow a recognition of those filtration of rights coming down in order. So the most important right for a believer who believes in this great entity is to firstly know what that entity is and then give it its right. And the only way we can know that is if that entity has communicated with us. And we believe it has. Because there are certain things in the Quran that rationally don't make sense from a limited perspective. Now we can get into that, but I'm trying to sort of go through it systematically to impress upon you that there is this rational basis for a belief, a properly basic belief in God. And to deny that is to go against these properly basic ideas and laws. And so the Quran came and it said the most important right is the right of God. And then in the Quran, God juxtaposes with the right of God, guess what? Out of all the things God could have said, okay, the next most important right after God's is this. He says, the right that you have towards your mother and father. It says, be ihsanan, the best that you can be to your mother and father. Ihsanan is in the superlative of the language. Not your second best, not your third best. And do you know what the standard is in the Quran? In the Quran, God says, if one of them or both of them reach old age, it says, extend a wing of humility over them. And don't say, oof. Forget a word of disrespect. The height that Islam gives to the parents is you can't even make a sound of disrespect. You know, like kissing your teeth.
Yeah.
That's the equivalent of the word oof in the Arabic language. And then God says, do not kill your children, for God feeds them and He feeds you. This is in reference to the pagan Arabs of Arabia before Islam came to enlighten them. Because they turned away from the source, they began to improvise in life. They started to worship this source in the form of idols. And we believe when you turn away from the source of all truth, you will begin to improvise in life, which may lead to bad consequences. So one of the consequences, one of the ways of life that they adopted was that a daughter is a financial liability. A daughter is inferior to a male. And so what they used to do is the poorer ones amongst them used to, when they gave birth to a daughter, they would go and bury it alive, literally within days of its birth. And we have stories of one woman who became a Muslim. She said that she remembers one of her final daughters that she buried, a third one I think it was. The hand came out from the sand and grabbed her finger. And she said, I vowed from that day that I would never do that again. This is before she became a Muslim. So she had that instinct. So Islam is an establishment of rights.
Yeah.
The Prophet said, you are not a believer in God if you go to sleep with your stomach full whilst your neighbour's is empty. This is literally, you don't believe in God. So all of these rights, therefore, have what we refer to as consequences.
Yeah.
Just like in our society, right? We have laws. You break those laws, there's going to be consequences. Yeah. So if it's true that this Creator has communicated with mankind and has given us a purpose, and this purpose are those basic, obvious truths that we all recognize, and we end up violating those, then we believe that there are going to be consequences to this. If not in this life, then in the hereafter. So in the Quran, God doesn't just tell us about who He is, but He gives us an understanding of what our purpose is and what will happen to us in the hereafter. And God says in the Quran, the one who created you the first time will recreate you a second time. And is it not easy for Him? Meaning quite literally, this thing had all this power to do it the first time. Why can't it bring you about the second time? So this is the message of Islam. The message of Islam is that there are consequences to our purpose in life. And the most important purpose, we have to make it right with the Creator before we meet our death. So Islam is literally calling people to the best version of themselves. Not the second best, nor the third best. And we believe anyone...
It might be a bit controversial.
Go for it.
Do you think some people believe in religion and have this place where you go to before you die because they're scared of dying, so they need something to look forward to?
Yes, they do, but we would say that there's a reason behind that. In other words, just like when we call people like yourselves as atheists to the worship of God, and we don't do so on blind following. We're trying to convince you through argumentation, through the Quran, that this is something that's in you. What you've done is you've covered it over. So that you might have heard this word. Unfortunately, it's often bandied about in a negative way, but it's not really negative if you understand the meaning of it. Kafir, disbeliever.
Yeah.
Right? In the Arabic language, you know what? Kafara means the farmer who tills the seed. Puts a seed in the ground and then covers it over with mud, right? It's that covering process is kafara, which means the truth is there within every human being, but what happens is they end up covering the truth over. But that doesn't mean that the truth is lost. It will always be there in every human being. It's just a case of being able to recognize the truth or being reminded of it and being able to reveal the seed and then nurture that seed. And that nurturing is us calling people to Islam.
Yeah.
So when people do become Muslims, they do it on the basis of, well, you know what? I looked at Islam through the Sun newspaper or through Tommy Robinson, telling me that it's a terrorist religion. It's about, forcing religion upon other people. It's about ISIS. It's about this. It's about jihad. It's about that. I've looked in the Quran. I've looked at the prophetic Sunnah.
Extremists in every religion, though, so you shouldn't.
I'm glad you said that.
One person
Exactly.
in a box.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Look at the vast
unfair.
majority.
That's unfair.
Yeah, exactly.
To do that.
So when people look into Islam, they study it, they're blown away by it because they never realize that a religion like this has all these rational arguments that are appealing to their hearts.
Yeah, but there's good and bad in everything. I mean, there's good Christians, there's bad Christians.
Yes.
There's good Islam,
Muslims.
Yeah.
And there's bad Muslims. Yeah, exactly. And the God actually tells us that we are going to fall short. He says, all the children of Adam, or our Prophet said, all the children of Adam, the children of God, they sin. But the best of those who sin are those who repent. That's the best of them. So God recognizes that we're weak. We're going to trip up, we're going to fall over. But the ones who are the best of us are the ones who get up and they want to rectify things. But that can only be done by following not the second or third best way in life, but by following the best way in life. And we say that that can only be achieved not by following the limited laws of man, but by following the laws that have been revealed by God to mankind. So Islam is a religion of establishment of rights, from the most important, God, to all the way down to the most important. Even though I told you that the pathway has rights, the Prophet Muhammad saw one of his companions or some of his companions loitering on the roadway. So he went up to him and he said, give the roadway its rights. And they said, "O Messenger of God, how do we do that?" He said, spread the salutations of peace. You might have heard the Muslims say, Assalamu alaikum, peace be unto you.
Yeah.
That's literally us asking God to be merciful towards our brother and sisters.
Yeah.
And then we say in response, wa alaikum assalam, and God's peace and mercy be upon you. So everything has rights. The Prophet told us that animals have rights. Yes, it is true in Islam that it recognizes that human beings are omnivores. But it also says don't go to extremes in your religion. This is such an important message that Tommy Robinson and the ilk will not tell their people. That Islam, the foundation of Islam, is to be upon the middle way.
It doesn't help with media coverage as well and things like that.
No. The media, I remember Noam Chomsky,
There's stuff that paints a really bad picture.
Precisely.
And it's what they want to show as well. Like main media, they can show what
It's
they want to.
horrible because
You know what, believe me, we don't care. You know why? The media can do this, and what it does is it forces people to find out, well, Islam is the big subject of the West at this moment. I want to know, I want to find out more about it. So even though we're not doing our job as Muslims in inviting people to what we believe, we'll literally give them the best way in life. They're coming towards Islam into our mosques without us even really we're not even fulfilling our objective as Muslims.
Yeah, I guess it's the thing of when people feel comfortable if they've done their research on it.
Yeah.
If they're happy to go forward.
Yeah, because look, we're all social creatures. So when they have a look at the way the Muslims are, they find out Islam teaches Muslims never to judge a person by their skin color, nor their culture. There's no superiority. The Prophet Muhammad, one of his last and final sermons to 100,000 of his companions, he said that this is a famous statement of his, no Arab has superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab over an Arab, nor a black man over a white man, nor a white man over a black man, nor a white man over a black man, except through piety and good deeds.
Yeah.
The only thing that differentiates us as Muslims is we judge each other by how close we are to God through not just our belief, because anyone can say whatever they want. The true test is whether you're living the talk.
Actually speak louder than words.
Yes, exactly. And that's why in the Quran God constantly has this juxtaposition. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Those who believe and do righteous good deeds. In Islam we don't have this idea that you can separate your belief from actions. The actions are what determine the belief. That's why we're here, sacrificing. I could be at home lazying about watching a movie or doing whatever, right? Playing a game, but I don't do that. Because I know my time on this earth is short and I have a purpose. And I also believe that it's selfish on my part. If I have the truth and I'm seeing people destroying themselves through improvisation in life, I owe it to myself to spread that firstly to my children and my loved ones, and then to those in the outer circle, and then beyond that. That's the call of Islam. So Islam is based upon 5 pillars. The first pillar is how a person becomes a Muslim. And how you become a Muslim doesn't require you becoming baptized and taking a bungee jump into water, nothing like that. The person, if he or she believes that this is the truth, the fundamental truth, if he or she believes that this has come down from God and it cannot be from anyone other than God, then all they have to do is repeat with their lips, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, that there is none worthy of worship and adoration and love in truth except the one who brought everything about, God, whose name in the Arabic language is Allah. And there is none worthy of being followed in truth except the man Muhammad, who is the last and final messenger from amongst the very many messengers that you might have heard of: Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, David, Joshua, John the Baptist, Jesus. Incidentally, we Muslims believe that Jesus will come back nearer the end of days. So how does Islam inculcate within Muslims a belief that this has to be from God? Well, one of the ways it does so is through prophecies. These prophecies are not obscure prophecies. These prophecies are detailed, and if I gave you some of the prophecies, you'll probably think, wow, that's quite profound. Our Prophet Muhammad is a prophet, and one of the objectives of a prophet is that he gives prophecies. And these prophecies, in the Quran, you'll find prophecies that were fulfilled during his time to try and convince the pagan Arab, because the pagan Arabs, when the Prophet said to them, I have come as a prophet of God to tell you that your worship of God in the form of idols is a crime against God, and that only God should be recognized and worshipped. They found that this was an inherent, it was something that it was not in their best interest. It was a threat against their lifestyle, because they used religion as part of their business as well. So what did they try and do? They tried to kill Muhammad and his companions, torturing some of his companions, forcing some of them to migrate from Arabia, placing large boulders on some of the slaves because they didn't have anyone to protect them, and telling them literally, renege, don't worship the religion of Muhammad, carry on worshipping the religion of your forefathers. But some of these people, they would rather die than give up the truth. That was how convinced and committed they were to the truth. So Islam actually told the pagan Arabs to, they found that it was a threat, and so they weren't being sincere to the truth. And so Islam actually came to tell the people to come back to the true worship of God and be sincere towards this. I forgot the purpose of the point I was trying to make now. But that's essentially the religion of Islam. The first pillar is to worship God alone and to follow Muhammad upon the truth. Oh, that was it. The way Islam convinces someone that it is from God. The prophecies in the Quran to convince the pagan Arabs that this is from God, and some of the prophecies that took place way after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. So for instance, the Prophet Muhammad told us that there will be a last day where all of creation will be brought to an end. God will recreate the world, and you've heard of it before, right? The Day of Judgment. It's spoken of by the Jews, Christians, and the Muslims. The Prophet gave what's known as prophecies of the signs before the Day of Judgment, the minor signs and the major signs. One of the minor signs, and I find this really, really profound, because I can't get my head around rationally how it's possible for an illiterate man living in the middle of a desert, the Arabian desert, to have made this prophecy, and the prophecy to come today, to become true only today. There's never been a time during his time, 1400 years ago, until now, that this prophecy might have been fulfilled. The Prophet said that the Day of Judgment will not come until rivers and meadows once again return to the lands of Arabia. He says the rivers and meadows will return to the lands of Arabia. Remember, he was from the desert. Do you know when the last time it was that Arabia was fertile and green?
No, actually.
It was during the Holocene period, which was about 7,000 BC. Because after what's known as the Younger Dryas, which was the ending of the Ice Age, and the striking of a comet, the Earth went through a period of intense climate change. And Arabia became green to the point where there were hippopotamus, there were all sorts of animals in that area. But eventually the climate began to change. Now, how was he able to make two prophecies in one? Number one, 7,000 years before the Prophet was born, roughly, and before this knowledge was lost to mankind, how did he know that the lands of Arabia were once meadows and rivers? And number two, why would he place all of his eggs into one basket and say, the lands of Arabia will become green once again? It's only today, if you have a look at Saudi Arabia, Mecca, Medina, and these other places, whether it's through human beings, own faults, through climate change, that the lands of Arabia are becoming green, that the sands are becoming more fertile. So it's an incredible prophecy. Another prophecy, the Prophet said that he spoke about how when mankind as a collective becomes extremely promiscuous, people start sleeping around with other people. The Prophet said then you will be afflicted by diseases that your forefathers never knew about. So we believe that because mankind, when they become more promiscuous, when they begin to sort of water down the idea, the sanctuary, the holiness of the institution of marriage, when they begin to say that, well, you know what, I don't need to be married in order to procreate or to have sex. Let me go out there and just sleep with as many people as I want. As long as I'm being good according to what I believe is good, as long as I'm not harming anyone. But when you begin to sort of make that grow to the point where human beings en masse are doing it, then the Prophet said that God will inflict upon us diseases, sexually transmitted diseases, yes, that our forefathers never heard of. So have a look at the way HIV arose. Look at the way syphilis, gonorrhea has blown through the roof. And look at these other sexually transmitted diseases that have arisen. Monkeypox and some others that none of our ancestors heard of. But this is the consequences of God drawing our attention to the fact that if you turn away from the laws of God, there are consequences. Now, in the Quran, God says, God does not order you to evil. Do you say of that God which you do not know? God didn't tell us to go and exploit other people. God didn't tell us to go and sleep with our neighbors' wives, or the neighbor's wife come and sleep with the man next door. God told us to maintain a balanced way in life, like I mentioned before.
And he also gave people free will.
He gave them free will, and the freedom of will is for us to choose what to do and what not to do. And there are consequences to that.
There's consequences to any action.
Exactly. And those
good or bad, you need to choose that.
precisely. Now imagine you lived in a world where there is no free will. Would that world make sense?
Not necessarily.
Exactly. So in the Quran, God says He has created everything in pairs so that ye may reflect.
They preach a false prophet, mate. It's in the Bible. Jesus is a false prophet.
I assume that's Christianity and the Christian love, as they call it, right? Anyway, so
That's what I mean, shoving it down your throat. Oh, God.
I know.
There's just no need for stuff like that. Like, there's no antagonised anything here. Like,
We're used to it. We're used to it.
White people.
We're used to it. White people, black people, it doesn't matter. Irrespective of the people, we get it. But look, guys, the message was, the Quran says that God's created everything in pairs so that you might reflect. Meaning, if there was only light and no darkness, would we be able to appreciate what light is if there was nothing to measure it by?
No, it's because you're so used to it. Once you're used to something,
Right.
it comes
But
out every day.
okay, but I'm talking about conceptually. Would we be able to live this in a world of discrimination, where we can discriminate between the good and the bad, right and wrong? Imagine there was only good and there was no evil. Wouldn't we be like automatons, just living our life? Because there's no evil to measure it by, right? I mean, that's something for you guys to maybe think over. But the Quran says that God created death and life so that He may judge which of us are best in deeds. So our scholars have told us that this world is not a world of absolute good and absolute evil. It is a world of both good and evil. Why? So that God, not only would God be able to tell the difference between who is right and who is wrong, but we may be also, amongst ourselves, be able to differentiate between the right and wrong. That's why we have freedom of choice. Free will allows us to look at the world, to recognize the good, differentiate from the evil, know that it's obvious, and then make the conscious decision. Am I going to be sincere towards the truth and live the best version of myself, or am I going to be insincere and carry on doing what I know is detrimental to me, my family, my loved ones, and humankind at large? So imagine, the Quran says, don't drink alcohol. It says, in alcohol there is some good, but the evil is far greater. So shun such abomination so that you may prosper. So the Quran says that alcohol has some medicinal properties. It's got some good, but the evil is far greater. Now, if you know that alcohol is a poison and it doesn't bring any good to you in the long term, why would you not want to give it up immediately and adopt a healthy way of life? That's why your generation, and I say your generation because your generation younger than me, your generation is adopting the teetotaler lifestyle. That's why pubs are closing down. But we didn't need human beings to improvise in life to figure this out. We submitted ourselves. Yeah, so we submitted ourselves to God already. We said, look, we don't need to go through experimenting. Well, let me have a swig and see where it leads me. No, God, we know this is the truth. We've adopted it. God tells us to jump, we jump. He tells us to sit down, we sit down. Why? Because whatever God has made impermissible, there is greater harm in it than good. And whatever God has made permissible, there is greater good in it than harm. The knowledge may not have come to us. Like for instance, why has God in the Quran made the eating of pig forbidden? Now, as Muslims, because we recognize the Quran to be the truth, and we recognize those fundamental truths to be true, we've adopted it and we accept it. Anything other than that filters down, like for instance these types of laws that we may not understand the wisdom behind them initially, and we may not ever understand the wisdom behind them. We may die and not know it, but because we know it's from the truth, we know that there has to be a reason behind them. But now today, scientists are telling us that the consumption of pork and pig, it has some of the highest level of viruses and bacteria in the dermis or the epidermis or whatever, the under the skin of an animal. But we didn't need scientists to tell us that. The Quran already told us that pork has been forbidden to you, but eat from the other things in the world, for they are pure, God says. Keep away from alcohol, even though there may be a little bit of good in it, but the harm is far greater. Keep away from gambling. Keep away from all these things that God has forbidden for a fundamental reason, because it destroys our potential of becoming what we would define as God-fearing individuals, submitters to God. That's what Islam, Muslim means the one who submits his will to the will of God. Because if that's the truth, and I've gone through the evidences, and I've said this can't be from anyone other than God. There are certain things here I can't rationally wrap my head around how a man who's an illiterate, not known for his learning, living amongst illiterates in the middle of the desert, could have known all these profound truths that we're only beginning to find out through science and so on and so forth. So that's the message. I know you're looking at your phone. I know you have to go as well.
It's not that, it's just I haven't eaten today. That's
oh yeah, mate, I haven't eaten anything.
Sandwiches in our bags.
I'm always open to do research.
The important thing is about educating yourself. You don't have to come out of experience like this to be in a new religion. But it's just about educating yourself. It's about anything. About anything.
Like
I'm
ignorance.
Not knowledgeable in the situation, but it's nice getting some education.
Because why they say that ignorance is the root of fear. So if you're ignorant about something, there's a likelihood that you're going to have preconceived notions about it, not based upon certainty and knowledge.
Some people just aren't. They're closed minded.
When you have children one day and they fall in love with a Muslim and they want to turn to that religion, you have to accept that as a parent that they don't want to be the same religion as you or all of that.
And before that, you as a parent, you want to firstly rectify yourself so that when you become a parent, you're in the best position in life to bring up the best people.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, if they came to me one day and said, "Oh, I would like to, become a Muslim and stuff," I'm going to sit there and educate myself for them.
And maybe through that education, who's to say that you may drop atheism, become a theist, or become a Muslim?
You have to be open to it.
So you have a look at the Muslims. Islam, like I said, doesn't judge between color and race. We judge people by our good deeds. The Quran says, "Fastabiqul khairat," race towards doing good deeds. That's what Islam is all about. Being the best version of ourselves. And once we've rectified ourselves, invite the people. Because we're not like some of these religions that, like the sadhu goes off into the forest to become enlightened, and then just remains there whilst his village people are tearing themselves apart based upon ignorance. Why would you do that? You owe it upon yourself to rectify firstly yourself. Once you've rectified yourself, now you have the tools to be able to help rectify other people. And if you're truly empathetic towards your fellow man, you would want to help them. So our invitation is, literally, come to Islam, come to success. And the way you do that is by, like I said, you give the testification of faith. Then the second pillar is you have to put the money where your mouth is. And that is the 5 daily prayers. The 5 daily prayers you might see the Muslims do, right? Where we all collectively come together. Oh, amazing. So that's where human beings really do stand shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah.
Right? In the Quran, the first chapter of the Quran is what all Muslims open up our prayer with. We say Allahu Akbar. We remind ourselves that the greatest is God.
Yeah.
And what that does is it forces us to recognize that everything else is now secondary. None of this belongs to us. In the Quran, God says that when some affliction falls us, something bad falls us, we're reminded that from God we have come and to God we shall invariably return. Meaning that nothing really belongs to us. You don't belong to him, he doesn't belong to you. No matter how much we think and love each other, ultimately, nothing really belongs to us. My children who I love, they don't belong to me. The wealth I've spent all my life accumulating, that doesn't belong to me. I'm going to die.
Come into this world with nothing.
You leave this world with nothing. You go back to the source. And so when you recognize that, imagine the mindset. If you recognize that nothing really belongs to you, if something bad happens to you, you're in a far better position to deal with it. Because if you're fully consumed in this idea that this is the world and that's all there is to it, and then suddenly things go pear-shaped, because you don't have something beyond yourself, you're going to become self-consumed about yourself. Or what did I do wrong? I did something wrong. All this evil happened because of me. What did I do wrong? So this idea of blaming yourself is mitigated by the belief in God. Because suddenly you believe that there is a creator, a Lord, a sustainer of all things that brought you into existence. You're going to go back to it. It's going to hold each and every one of us to account. What is there to worry about? There's nothing to worry about thereafter. So this is a higher state of consciousness that the Muslims, through learning and teaching and practicing, they're able to inculcate within themselves.
Yeah.
So the 5 daily prayers, that it disciplines us in life. That ultimately, it's not the religion that revolves around the world, but it is the world that should revolve around religion. Our life revolves around our 5 daily prayers, not the other way around. We drop everything and we pray. Because this is the most important thing, because we know prayer and gratitude and love is something that God, who gave us this purpose, I told you about the purpose in life, is going to judge us by. Did we fulfill his right first? And then did we fulfill the rights thereafter? If we fulfill the rights thereafter, but we failed in the most important right, then all the other things that we did in life will not count.
Yeah.
Because we failed in the purpose in life. Just like if I was to go about on a daily basis and help the old woman across the road, help this person, help that person, but when I get home, as soon as the door slams, I go up to my mum, I slap her, I tell her go and put the food on the stove and treat her. That's a dereliction of a person's duty. Because the most important right after God is your mother and father. And if you fail in that, but you have this smile on your face when you go out, then that's hypocrisy on a person's part. You're not practicing what you preach. And so the 5 daily prayers, we come together, we say Allahu Akbar, then we start to pray. We say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. We say all praise is due to God, all worship, praise is due to God, the Lord of all that exists. Right? Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. We remind ourselves that he is the most merciful, the most beneficent. Because God has these attributes and he knows our weaknesses. He created us, but he's also extremely merciful. And he incentivizes human beings to become a Muslim, reminding us that his love and his mercy are conditional. Just like the parents' love is conditional, just like human beings when we interact with each other, our love is conditional. We don't just, unless there's some impairment, we don't give our love out unconditionally. It requires to be earned. We let people into our life, we earn trust, we begin to learn to live with them, and then, we increase in our love towards each other and our mercy towards each other. If they violate something, we become more defensive and we take that love and mercy away to a certain extent. The same is true of God. God also has his love for creation, but this love and this mercy is conditional. So we remind ourselves in our prayer that when we obey God, he is extremely merciful. Maliki Yawmiddin, the master of the day of judgment. We remind ourselves that this world will be brought to an end, and the Quran describes how it will be brought to an end in vivid ways. How the sun and the moon will wind round and lose its light, how the world will be destroyed, how the earth will be torn asunder, how the mountains will be turned into literal wall, like structure. Maliki Yawmiddin, the master of the day of judgment, that we're all going to be held to account. And then we remind ourselves, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. You alone we worship, and you alone we turn to for aid and assistance. And then we remind ourselves, guide me to the right path, meaning there's only one right path. There aren't multiple truths. Like right at the beginning of this talk, I said that the truth is narrow by definition. It's not expansive. You can't have expansive truths and all these contradictory notions being described as truth. No, truth is clear. It is narrow, and it